This is the last lecture for Bio121 Evolutionary Principles. Chapter 24 is not available in all books, but I do have additional materials should you desire. Define evolution, microevolution, macroevolution, species, adaptation, natural selection, and sexual selection. Compare microevolution and macroevolution. List the 3 things needed for evolution through selection. Compare natural selection and sexual selection, and probably artificial selection too. Relate evolution to meiosis, and if you're in lecture, you're probably not watching this right now. We're going to discuss this in lecture. 2 different definitions of evolution we're just looking at here. First off is the descent with modification. Cougars and domestic cats share a common ancestor, but they took different directions. One maxed out their stealth and attack ability, the other maxed out their cuteness and ended up getting domesticated. We also know that old fossils look different from newer fossils, and that means that things are descending. Things are different now. So the idea of a species changing over time would fit into this definition of evolution. Another definition of evolution is the change in allele frequencies in a population over generations. The frequency of the type A blood has changed as populations of humans have migrated. This can be easily measured in a relatively short time and is very easily quantified. And these 2 different definitions of evolution fall into the 2 forms of evolution. First off is macroevolution. This is the formation of new species like cougars and cats. A species is defined as a group of organisms that can produce viable fertile offspring when they mate. And it's notable, evangelical creationism disagrees with the concept of macroevolution. They use a different thing known as baramins instead of species. And they would say that you never see a cat evolving into a dog. They are different baramins and they are set in stone. Microevolution is showing changed populations, that over time a population can change. A population is all individuals of a species living in the same place and living at the same time. No one in their right mind disagrees with microevolution. You can literally observe it in a petri dish. There are requirements for evolution through selection. First off is variability. There must be different phenotypes in a population. This implies the existence of different alleles in a population, and this variability allows natural selection to act on things. But this variability is useless unless there's also heritability. We do not see babies born with pierced ears because pierced ears are not heritable. We do see babies born with attached earlobes or not attached earlobes because those variations are heritable. The last is differential survival and reproduction. In every generation, individuals with one phenotype are going to produce more than individuals with other phenotypes. So take, for example, a population of dandelions that have a short stem variety and a long stem variety. You have a lawnmower go over them. All the long stem ones get chopped off, and the short stem ones stay around long enough to produce seeds. The seeds will sit in the soil, and those will have a higher survival and reproduction than the long stem ones that kept getting cut down. And the result of these 3 things are that change of frequency of phenotypes in a population over time, and that's evolution. So we have something called selection here. Selection is the process by which a particular phenotype will have a greater reproductive success than individuals with other phenotypes. And this changes the frequency of the phenotype if it's heritable, which changes the mean phenotype, the average phenotype in the population. So we see the average depth of the beak. How deep is that beak? In genus Fortis, a finch species on the Galapagos archipelago. What we see is between 1978 and 1976, you have an increase in the average beak depth during a drought, during which the ones with the deepest beaks had the greatest success at opening seeds and therefore had higher fitness, i.e. left more offspring with different beaks. There are 3 types of selection we're going to get through in several slides. First off is natural selection, where the cause of differential reproduction is the environment. Next is sexual selection, where the cause of differential reproduction is mate choices. Some organisms are just more attractive than others. And last is artificial selection, which is where humans pick certain individuals to mate of other species and allow them to mate and have higher fitness. So natural selection is a form of selection in which individuals with the favorable phenotype survive to reproduce more than individuals without favorable phenotypes. This means that those Mantises that are the most well camouflaged survive on the background on which they are the most camouflaged. Different types of finches that survive best on certain types of diet are going to have different sizes and shapes of beaks, and we call these things that give them higher fitness adaptations. They're the phenotypes that increase survival and thus the fitness. They leave behind more offspring. Next is sexual selection. This is a form of selection in which individuals with certain phenotypes are more likely to obtain mates than individuals with different phenotypes. And this can lead to sexual dimorphism, which is where species can have different looks for different male and female. So we see here the peacock is a great example of sexual dimorphism. The peacocks with the largest tails are the ones that will attract the most peahens and thus have the highest fitness. They will have the most offsprings. Then you have your red-sided eclectus, where the male is a pretty dull green, but the female is a brilliant red. So the females that can attract the most males are going to be the ones with the highest fitness. So sexual selection leads to these phenotypes. Last, we have artificial selection. This is a form of selection where humans just kind of pick what they want and just breed for it. And all three of these have variability, heritability, and differential reproduction. This is why there are so many dog breeds around, is because humans have been choosing them. Remember, all types of selection require variability, heritability, and differential survival and reproduction. Well, differential reproduction overall, resulting in individuals with phenotypes with greater fitness being selected for, either by the environment through natural selection, mates through sexual selection, or the whims of humans through artificial selection. And all types of selection result in favorable phenotypes increasing in the frequency in a population. And whatever is favorable is determined by the selective pressure. Last, let's link it to meiosis. Meiosis increases the variability of heritable traits. You may remember that during meiosis, we have segregation, which means that you have one allele per gamete. That's good. We also have independent assortment, which means you're going to have these alleles sort independently, and you're going to have new combinations of alleles. We also have crossing over, which results in new combinations of alleles. And we do have, during cell cycles, mutations, which introduces new alleles. Take, for example, these two boys of mine. They have the same parents, but they have very different combinations of alleles, and trust me, they are very different, despite somewhat looking alike.